All right, guys, so we're back out in the garage to continue the breakdown of the Galant. So, if you haven't seen the other videos, of course, this is my Galant. It has a spun bearing. It is knocking. I actually went to the junkyard and picked up this block here from a Dodge Stratus Coupe. Did get a few accessories with it. It sounds like it has good compression, but I really am unsure. But everything I could test at the junkyard tells me this should be a good block. I chose to go this route just because it's the quickest way to get the car back up and running. As I mentioned before, I will be upgrading a few things along the way. Mainly the clutch, the oil pump. I'm going to put some head studs in it as well. I think I mentioned all that in the other video. So it will be getting a little bit better. So for right now, my turbo, of course, is over here. Got my new clutch. Is an Action Stage 3 with the 6-pluck. I got some ARP head studs. These are the standard head studs. And new oil pump. That is by ACL. And I've heard good things about these. I've used one of these before in my old GSX. And they're about 40-50 bucks cheaper than OEM. So you have to decide for yourself whether the 40-50 bucks is worth the cost of your build. This motor, I'm only needed to hold up for the rest of this year. I do plan on doing the build motor, come this winter into beginning of next year. So that will be done then. So I really don't need it to hold up for a really long time, just enough to get me through the summer. What we did, just to bring you guys back up to speed, is, like I said, just remove the turbo. We took the downpipe off, and we got the charge piping and everything off. All right, so in today's video, what I'm going to be doing is actually removing the head. One, because I want to get this valve cover off. I don't want this to get damaged. This is actually going in the house because I am not going to risk messing this up. And two, that would allow me, when I do go to drop this thing, to have another foot or so of clearance to pull it out. Because the only real issue with pulling the engine from underneath the car is that you have to jack the car really high. And this Harbor Freight jack I have actually needs a little bit of assistance via some wood blocks to get the car up high enough. All right, so that's what we're going to do today, guys. I'm going to show you guys how to remove the head. And I think I'm going to pull off the intercooler and get that off as well, because I have decided to go ahead and paint at least half of that black. So that's what's on the agenda for today. Let's get to it. All right, so of course, me taking the head off of this is going to be a little bit different than your normal car, just because I have a few extra things on here. So I'm going to start with removing those extra bits. First thing I'm going to remove is my lines for my catch can. Of course, you guys remember I installed this. It has the AN lines welded in there. And I actually went and purchased this AN wrench. And it wasn't until after I got it, and again, Trey actually pointed this out to me, is that if you're going to get one of these AN wrenches, you want to get one that has like the smooth sides on it. Because with this, you end up having to like put it further down on it and slide it over. So basically, I'll have to put it down on the neck and then kind of slide it over the fitting itself. Whereas if I had a smooth side, I could just go straight down. So depending on your space, that could be an issue. Fortunately, I really haven't had a problem on this particular car, but that is something to be aware of. If you can get one of these, get one that has a straight size, not one that curves all the way around. But so far, in the few times I've used this, this has done the job and has not marred up my fittings. So link for this down in the description. All right, so now with those off, my next step is going to be to remove my newly installed cop kit, followed by the valve cover. Now I'm going to pull this entire harness out, so I'm actually going to unplug this from down here. So remember, guys, this is the cop plate and the extended length harness from JD Customs. Again, check that out if you guys are interested. It fits well. Of course, this is for the Evo 8. The plate, just so you know, is a little short inside of the Kia valve cover. I'm not sure if it's the same way on the Evo, but on this side I have about an inch, maybe an inch and a half to the end of the valve cover, and on this side it's about the same. But it does fit, it does line up. Of course, remember those boots that I talked about, they actually come up with it, which is why I like to mount them on the valve cover first, because that way when you push these in, it'll squeeze it up against the valve cover and guarantee that seal. So next we're going to remove the valve cover itself, and for that you're going to need a 10mm socket and just go around the edge. I think you have 3 on the front. There are 2 on the side over here. There are 5 on the inside. And then there are 3 more on the back. Now again, if yours is stock, you're going to have a few more things to take off. Like your throttle cable will run over the valve cover. and a few other things. I really don't remember off the top of my head. Most of it can be taken off with this a 10 or a 12. Because I don't have a timing belt cover on here currently, we can just lift off. Otherwise, there would be, I think, 4 bolts and a timing belt cover over here on this side. So that comes right off. So you guys can check that out. Again, the head, everything in here looks brand new. Like, and so you guys know, I am doing it slightly out of order. If I was at the junkyard, I would have pulled, the wiring harness and a few other things off the sides before I pulled the valve cover off. But because it is powder coated, I want to keep it clean. That's why I went ahead and took this off now. Right, so now I'm going to go ahead and start removing the wiring harness from the top of the engine. So we have our cam position sensor here. I modified the factory heat shield, if you guys can see this here, like to fit onto this Kia head. And by that, I just trimmed part of the bottom of it and then bolted it up here because these are known to go bad or be damaged from the heat of the turbo manifold. And I felt like I should put something here just to help protect it. When you're removing the harness, you just want to keep working your way to the back. You don't want to pull too hard on anything. Go down here, remove this one from the starter. And I think that is a 12. This is actually a 13 on this particular starter. And before I go any further, I actually forgot to remove radiator hose. And all I'm doing with the harness is just moving my hand along it, and as I feel tension, looking for where that point is, and then unclipping it or unbolting it. And it's really that simple because our end goal here is to be able to take the entire harness and kind of lay it over to one side. I'm going to lay it over the fender or somewhere just out of the way. Because pretty much everything in your engine bay is just attached to that one harness. So we're going to make sure we get that out of the way. Just real quick, guys, one thing I don't think I ever mentioned, I know I filmed it and just didn't get a chance to put it into a video, but these injectors, these are Bosch 1000s. Now, before you fly off the handle, Bosch actually makes the injectors for Injector Dynamics and, Fuel Injector Clinic and a few other places. So basically those guys buy these injectors and then, they do their own special thing to them. But the injectors themselves are made from Bosch. And they actually also make a lot of OEM injectors as well. I'll show you guys this when I pull them out. Mine actually say Fomoco on the side of them, or Ford Motor Company. So I'm not sure which car these came from. They've been running well. We haven't had a problem with them. So if you're looking to go a cheaper route, make sure you go with some things that are actually branded as Bosch. Just keep in mind though, is that most of the time the company selling these aren't going to flow match them. They also have this special clip on them that you can either buy the adapters and just wire them in, which is what I did because it's just 2 wires, or you can buy an adapter that will allow you to keep your stock harness and adapt it to this this new plug. All right, guys, so a few moments later, I've got most of the harness over here. There is one more main harness that you may not see where it goes. It stems from the starter here and actually runs along the back of the engine and back to your alternator, which is back over here. So getting to that alternator was already a tight fit. I didn't really help things by putting that catch can there, but so I may have to get to that from the bottom, maybe easier. You also don't want to forget about your plugs. Over here you have your crank position sensor, your power steering switch sensor thing, and then there's another plug all the way at the bottom, and that's going to run this way. All right, guys, so I got the harness out. You can see it's just laying over the fender. I think I got most everything out. I know I have a couple wires just for the gauges that are zip tied along the firewall, so I'll just make sure I'm aware of that. That's also another reason why I want to remove the head, because it'll allow me to really be able to see what's going on when I do drop the block and the transmission, because those will be coming out as one piece. So everything should be out at this point. If you are doing this on a stock car, what I would recommend to go ahead and take off the bracket that connects the intake manifold to the block. Now, I don't run that bracket on this car. A lot of people don't. It doesn't really serve any purpose as far as we can tell. So again, 2 ways to do this. You can reach behind the intake manifold and undo the bolts. I believe they're 12s. Again, I don't have one on this car, so I can't tell you exactly. But the simpler way I feel is just to go underneath the car, especially if you're at the junkyard, and just undo the bolts from the bottom side, because you actually have a straight shot to them, provided you have a long extension. You can take that bracket off. So the next obstacle we have to face is decide what we're going to do with this timing belt. Now, if I was at the junkyard, I would just cut it. That would save you a bunch of time. But since I do want to keep this timing belt, even though I may not use it, so as I'm kind of standing back and looking at it, I do have a few other things I need to remove, like this power steering hose here needs to come off, as well as the fuel line back there needs to come off. But for the most part, we're not that far away from getting this head off of this thing. All right, guys, so I actually ran into a bit of a situation. I've always spoke highly of the Galant belt as being a good choice for when doing the head swap. But if you notice, I have the belt off, and I didn't have to do anything on the bottom side of the motor. I was able to just, using my fingers, pull the belt off the side of the cam gear. Like, I've never been able to do that before, and that tells me that maybe there wasn't enough tension on that belt to begin with, and maybe that would have slipped off eventually. I was going to remove, that hose that went to the fuel rail, but I forgot. It's actually too close to the throttle body for me to be able to back that screw out, so I'm going to have to remove the fuel rail. And that's not a big deal. It's just two 12mm bolts that hold this thing down to the intake manifold. So you do want to keep in mind that when you go to lift this off, you're probably going to have some fuel in it. And here, guys, you can see the injectors that I was talking about. So I had to actually purchase these top hats separately. But if you look on the side of the injector, it says 6M8G-BA and then FOMOCO right below it. And then on this part of the injector, it says FIC 1000 and then another part number. All right, so my next step, now that I've got the fuel rail out of the way, is to remove the throttle cable. And for that, you will need some slack. So I did already unbolt it from the intake manifold. And we're just going to pull that around and slide it through. Now, that's pretty much the same thing on the factory throttle body. Obviously, I have an S90. But it's pretty much the same thing, but there is a little bit more in the way. But you will need slack on it to pull that line out. In case you're not familiar, when you do the head swap, you actually use the Evo dipstick tube is one of the pieces that you need. And it actually bolts up to the intake manifold. Now, you probably don't have to do that, but there is a spot for it, so I did bolt it up. So you want to keep that in mind before you pull the head off or get ready to pull the head off, that is connected to the intake manifold and then it's pushed down into the block. So I'm going to go ahead and unbolt that. That should be a 12. And then we can move on to taking the actual head bolts or head studs out. All right, so now the dipstick tube is free. I'm actually going to go ahead and pull this out. So there is a dipstick tube. You see it has two mounting points. I don't think this one went to anything, and this one I just had bolted to the intake manifold. All right, guys, so we're almost done. We just have a few more steps. I'm going to go ahead now and remove the heater hoses from the firewall. And that you can just use a regular set of pliers to get those off. All right, so now with those hoses off, we should be good to go. So we're actually ready to start removing the head bolts. And for that, all you're going to need is a 12mm 12-point socket. I actually keep one of these in my junkyard bag because this is not something that you want to forget, especially if you're trying to pull a cylinder head. Something else good to have is a pair of needle nose pliers or a magnet or something to help you get the head bolts out. And the reason I say that is because depending on what you're doing, it is possible for the head bolts or studs to gouge the head or the block while removing them. So I like to, especially with head bolts, go ahead and pull the bolts out completely. That way I don't have to worry about them getting caught up and scarring something. A pair of needle nose pliers or a magnet tool will typically work well for that. So now there is a lot of torque behind these bolts, so a 1/4 inch impact is definitely not going to work. But if you have a 1/2 inch, at least a mid torque or higher, it'll come right off. All right, guys, so that's it. Just 10 head bolt magnet tool here. Let's see if I can pick these out of here. Now, guys, you might be wondering, is it okay to use these? Everywhere that you look will say do not reuse these. They're not meant to be torqued down more than once. Again, I've never done it, so I can't recommend it. Everywhere I've seen says do not reuse these head bolts once they've been stretched, which was the reason. So, of course, I could have went with more head bolts. What I can confirm is that at around 10 psi, 200 horsepower, these did not have an issue with the head lifting. These head bolts are made by Fel-pro, quite a bit cheaper than head studs. So if you're looking for around 200 horsepower, 10, 12 psi, these may be a good route for you to go if you're trying to keep your budget. All right, so now we should be good to go. So in hindsight, I should have removed the strut towel bar while the wheel was still on the ground. So with that said, I believe we're at the point where I can go ahead and take the head off. Now you may need to tap this with a rubber mallet just to make sure it's broken free. But other than that, just take your time getting it out. I already have a space cleared on my bench over here that's got some foam padding down that this is going to go on. All right, and she's out. So one thing I did forget is to loosen this water pipe. Fortunately, it's just kind of press fit in there. But I was able to wiggle the head a little bit to get that to pop free. Of course, a little bit of water drained. Now if we look at our block, of course it looks fine from the top side. Doesn't look like I was having any major issues. Head gasket still looks good. Now, of course, if you have rod knock, you're not going to be able to tell that from up here anyway. All right, so if we move over here, we can check the head out. I'm going to inspect this. There shouldn't be any gouges in here, at least anything that you can grab with the nail. But I will go ahead and get some Scotch-Brite and take it to the head just to get off this little residue from the head gasket, and then give this thing the best chance of sealing when I put it back on, because I'm not going to have any of this stuff resurfaced. Alright guys, so I'm actually going to go ahead and wrap the video up. I'm not going to get to painting the intercooler tonight. It got kind of late on me. It's actually 12:47 at night right now, so I feel like we made a good amount of progress tonight. We got the head off. We didn't cause any damage. I didn't break anything. So that's always a plus. Those things are what make these projects take a lot longer than they really should. But anyway, I want to thank you guys for watching my video. If you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, and I'll catch you guys later.